All right. Just like the other times we've looked at quizzes and stuff like that that have been posted on Angel, basically this has the question, the 4 answer selections. It shows how many people got the correct response. There's always one green check by it. How many got each of the other responses. It actually breaks it down to not just how many got it wrong, but which answers they picked. Right. This document was on Manifest Destiny. This was the guy who is credited with actually terming the phrase Manifest Destiny in this article that you're reading. And it is kind of a longer document. It's only a couple pages, but was single-spaced on that. The language was not as difficult as some of the earlier stuff that we've looked at, particularly the legal documents. This one also had a lot of stuff that came from the document itself, as well as a good mix of some of the things where you had to know something from outside the book to answer. And we'll just go through in order here. We have the camera on for the online students. For the online students, one thing that would help is if you actually do the practice assessments on this. Sent the email out before Thanksgiving, so there was over a week to complete these. I only had 3 of them who actually did it. Face-to-face class, y'all obviously did much better. This is from yours. You can see, I think pretty much everybody did it in this class. Right. The document itself will give you the answer to this first one. Right now, again, they're not always worded completely obviously. It's not like there isn't some manipulation of the language. And again, it's college level. You should be beyond that anyway. Right. But
you read that like 2 or 3 times to really just.
Yeah, that's yeah, and again, that'll actually, when we get to the end of this, I'm gonna go over the documents in the packet one more time. Again, give you some advice on that. It's one of the things I promote heavily. Read the documents, kind of try to break them down before you get into the exam, and then you'll have, hopefully, just going back to them for reference instead of having to read them 3 or 4 times. That's what will get you bogged down on the finals if you're not, prepared. So, this should be a good experience in that case.
Well,
Kind of
that's
see
what
what you
initially
need
you
to do.
said,
Yeah.
like the Manifest Destiny, initially you stated that it was for, they had the right to the whole continent, which could lead you to believe Mexico too as well. But then as you read it a little further, then it talked about expansion all the way to the Pacific coast, more or less.
That is a good point. It would be, if you go back to your directions, just pick the best responses.
Right.
Right. So this is one where that thing, reading the directions would help you on that one a little bit. I can see there is a logic to picking these other 2 because what he's advocating would include at least one of those territories. And as we know, this is also one of the times where where you have to be careful about the language in the question itself, because it's specifically asking what Sullivan writes to support. And he mentions, as you said, going basically the entire continent, the entire width of the continent. This is one where our outside information and knowing how it ends up could actually impede your response, because we did take California, we did take Oregon. So he doesn't necessarily advocate for either of those individually, but this would include both of those or either of those. So that's why this is the best response. He actually, as you mentioned, you go down to the document and open that up. I believe that was where I highlighted here. This was question 1. Between us and the proper parties of the case, in the spirit of hostile interference against us, for the avowed object of thwarting our policy, hampering our power, limiting our greatness, and checking the fulfillment of our manifest destiny to overspread the continent. So he envisions spreading out over the entire thing. So when it asks, the addition of, Texas is a good thing, but his reference to manifest destiny also includes what? Which of these looks like it would encompass that idea of spreading out over the whole continent? is, the first one would be best. Looks like most people got that one. Eventually, I think some people took more than one time on it, but would he advocate for taking California from Mexico? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Would he also advocate for taking all of the Oregon territory? Probably, yeah. I would imagine so. The question of territory overseas, we don't have any evidence one way or the other, do we? Would he advocate taking, the Philippines? Maybe, maybe not. So this one, no one picked, which is good, because that's the one you should be able to eliminate the easiest. The others have some valid points to them. He mentions the whole continent, so that would, it doesn't mention specifics between California, Oregon, both, whatever. As we know, Oregon, we didn't take the whole thing because it included all the territory that's now, Pacific coast of Canada up to the border of Alaska. He probably would have supported taking it, but he didn't get down to specifics, so this would be your best one. All right, the second one, he makes light of the argument that Texas, and then several choices here. No one picked it, had a large Catholic population, that's good. One person picked was still mostly inhabited by Native Americans who still had legitimate land claims. Did he mention Native Americans at all in the document, in the entire document? Yeah, he did. Towards the end. Did he mention anything about them having legitimate land claims?
No.
He didn't think they had legitimate
Them to
claims.
funnel down to Mexico.
Exactly, yes. That would be a good reason to eliminate that one. Not that he probably would make light of any land claims, but he doesn't raise the issue of them even having any. Two people picked would provide little economic benefit to the United States. Any justification for picking that one? I mean, if it's not going to give us an economic benefit, why take it over in the first place, right? His argument is not geared towards economics, really, though. It's geared towards politics and the spread of American,
There weren't really much arguments against it.
No, it wasn't.
In the text at all.
He does go into a pretty long diatribe where he takes the legal claims, the fact that we took Texas illegally, and says, that's all a bunch of junk. And that's right here in this second one. It's wholly untrue, unjust to ourselves, the pretense that the annexation has been a measure of spoliation, unrightful, and unrighteousness. Absolutely untrue, we did something wrong. Military conquest under forms of peace and law, territorial aggrandizement at the expense of justice due by a double sanctity to the weak. This view of the question is wholly unfounded. Do you think there are some well-grounded issues that could argue that the acquisition of Texas was illegal?
Sure.
Or, yeah.
But he sets a precedent. First he cites precedents.
Cites precedents, yeah.
And then he states that, you invited our people here, and then you were supposed to protect them and rule over and give them all the rights and responsibilities of your government.
Yeah.
You did not, so now we have to.
He is, basically, one document that we have in the exam packet, the Texas Declaration of Independence, he's basically just throwing the same stuff out that they said, right? Now, I was asking if he makes, which argument he makes light of. Is he actually weighing this argument very heavily? No, he's really making light of it. He's saying all this other stuff that contradicts this opinion is just like, we're not even going to acknowledge any validity to it, right?
Yeah, I think he's playing more on emotion.
It is, yes.
And
There's not as much logic in this as you would see in, say, Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence or something of that nature. Definitely not. Not a philosophical argument in the sense that he's applying logic. Definitely. All right. This third one, Sullivan argues that the acquisition of Texas would, one person said, cause the growth of slavery, another create tensions between England and France, and would stimulate the growth of railroads in the United States. Let's hold off on the first one because it's the exact opposite of the correct answer. Would create tensions against England and France. Anything in the document to lead you to that? It doesn't even bring it up. Anything in our knowledge outside of that that would say taking Texas would lead to diplomatic issues between England and France. Now, there was potential for leading to poor diplomatic relations between us and England or France, but not between those two countries. Right? Wasn't a trick question. You just got to basically, if you know your facts, now it's a trick question. Okay. All right. Stimulate the growth of railroads in the United States. We know what was happening with the growth of railroads based on our knowledge already at this point in time, 1840s. It's already growing, right? Yeah. Would it stimulate the growth of railroads? Yeah, probably into Texas, but he doesn't make a big point of that, right? And this one is one to be a little disconcerting as I read it, because this is one of those questions where it's right there in the document. All you have to do is read it, and that would be, what number was that? 3? Okay, that would be here. Sorry, I didn't highlight that one. That it will tend to facilitate and hasten the disappearance of slavery from all the northern tier of the present slave states cannot surely admit of serious question. I guess maybe the wording might throw you off vocabulary, but it will tend to hasten the disappearance of slavery from all the northern tier of present slave states cannot, in this case, admit or raise a serious question. The greater value of Texas, slave labor now employed in those states, must soon produce the effect of draining off that labor southwardly by the same unbearing. So he's saying all the slaves in the South, except for Texas, would disappear from the South and move to Texas, where they would then be isolated and die off naturally. So he's saying taking over Texas speeds up the process of getting rid of slavery. Again, as we know from our outside knowledge, is that true or false? Yeah, very false. Yeah. The key to this is, again, reading the question and recognizing whether it's asking for what's in the document or what's in your knowledge bank. And the part that Sullivan argues this, all right, that's the key there. You're looking for what Sullivan argues, not what we know as a historical fact actually happened. So, we know to go into the reading if we look at that question like that, and then we find he's actually saying it's going to speed up this process of getting rid of slavery. It doesn't ask if his argument is correct, right? So what we're looking for only is his argument. Okay. Number 4, from the text, it's obvious that Sullivan believed what? And we see that there were 2 responses, incorrect responses people did pick. This one no one picked: would never have a large enough population to greatly impact political control of the House of Representatives. He didn't really raise that. Would provide territory to remove more Native Americans and free other territory for white settlement. Anything in here envision taking over into this territory for the benefit of Native Americans? Basically, the whole argument is take over the whole thing so we can move white people in there, right? Texas would provoke a war with Mexico and England if made into a state. Might it provoke a war with Mexico?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it did, right? That was the starting point of the Mexican-American War. Might it provoke a war with England?
Mm-hmm.
We're not. Yeah. Yeah, this is one, as I say, read the question, also read the answer choices thoroughly. They can be precise too. If it stopped in Mexico, you can make an argument that actually happened. It'd be some justification, because your outside knowledge will tell you that's what actually happened. Okay. This one, most people did get to it. Texas would be divided into several states. And again, if we go in and look at this, right after the discussion of, actually, somewhere around here. Basically, he doesn't say it specifically, but this part, every new slave state in Texas will make at least one free state. If every slave state is also making at least one free state, by definition, that means you're dividing Texas into several states, right? So that one was, might apply a little bit of inference in there, but it is kind of right there in front of you. And again, it goes to just being careful as you read through the documents. Okay. Regarding slavery, Sullivan believed that, two people picked it, should be immediately abolished even at the expense of a war. Is this a guy advocating, basically we fight each other at any point here? Sounds like one of the guys who's a strong advocate for American unity. Even if he opposed slavery, keep America together. Okay. It is destined to die off even without government abolition, and that also was in this discussion that we looked at before. And he mentions that if you want to get to specific, as soon as the destined hour of emancipation shall arrive, we'll relieve the question of one of its worst difficulties, if not the absolute greatest. This one is kind of an inference question. It's pretty clear in there, but you do have to apply a little logic to figure out what he would believe. 6, regarding the various races in the United States, Texas, once Texas was annexed, Sullivan believed that two people picked African and Native Americans were inferior to white people, but superior to Mexican Americans because of their exposure to American institutions. Any evidence for that one?
No.
Yeah. In fact, to furnish the probability of the disappearance of the Negro race from our borders, the Spanish, Indian, American populations of Mexico, Central America, South afford the only receptacle capable of absorbing that race whenever they shall be prepared to slough it off, emancipated from slavery, and remove it from the midst of our own. He doesn't go into ranking these one over the other, really doesn't. Which also gets you this Mexican Americans and Native Americans superior to African Americans. He doesn't go into the discussion. He may have believed that, but he doesn't raise it in this document. This is a bit of an inference. You have to apply a little logic. Does he actually say specifically white Americans are superior to all Native Americans, Mexican Americans, and African Americans? We're equally inferior. He doesn't specifically say that, does he? But what does that tell you when he says, Mexico with its Spanish, Indian, African population is the only place our African Americans can go to. Saying get them all of them are, need to be away from us, basically. So, do you send people who are your equals off? Try to get rid of them? Well, obviously, if they're superior to them, do you want them to leave your country? No. This is, again, the best answer. Okay, this one, based on the political climate in 1845, if Texas had been divided into several states, it would likely have benefited. Now you notice I did not put any highlighting in this document here. Why is that? This is which type of question? Either inference, you do have to know something. You have to know the political climate of the country in 1845, right? So you have to apply some outside knowledge and some inference. And likely will get you to the point where you have to apply inference. We don't know the answer. Nothing in here gives you the answer. what's likely to have happened that requires you to apply logic, some deductive process. And as you can see, the answer choices that people pick kind of show that these are the ones people are more likely to struggle with. It's easier to get the ones that are right in front of you correct. All right, 5 people picked the South by increasing their representation in the House of Representatives enough to control that body. It is an inference that requires some outside knowledge. What does our outside knowledge tell us about the populations between North and South?
The South had slaves that increased their population.
Well, we do know that. In terms of this question, would the population of Texas be enough to swing the majority to the South in terms of population majority to the South? Probably not. So we would likely want to eliminate that one. Again, this is one where you have to have that outside knowledge of. The North by increasing some free territory in the western part of the current state of Texas. All right, how would it benefit the North? They already control the House, so the population shift would be inconsequential to them. This would be the Senate then, right? If every free state is matched by a slave state, does that change the balance of power in the Senate? What do we know if we go back to the Missouri Compromise? That was put in place specifically to do what? To keep that balance, so it's an even number of slave and free states. And here he's saying every slave state will be matched by a free state. So it's not likely to benefit the North. Based on our knowledge, of course, given the area, what's going to happen to Texas? Free or slave?
Slave.
It's going to be slave. So we should be able to eliminate that one based both on logical inference or from our knowledge. And let's see, no one picked this one. Which actually probably would have been the next best answer, believe it or not. Because if there was any benefit to the North, it would probably be economically because you have more raw materials. That's why they were wanting to add Texas in the first place, right? To have more cotton production. Okay. More likely it was going to benefit the South, increasing their representation in the Senate. We get that one. At a minimum, if what Sullivan envisioned was going to happen, we know more than likely every free state would be matched by a slave state. What actually did happen, we know Texas comes in as a slave state, so it adds Senate members to the southern block of votes there. And again, when you got to apply some logic and knowledge to, more people pick the wrong answer, but again, most people did get that to the right one there. Regarding people who were or would be free from slavery, Sullivan's belief most closely mirrors. And here you actually, again, have to know something about the politics in 1845. Does his views mirror Southern plantation owners? What do Southern plantation owners want? Slavery to continue, not just to continue, they're looking for it to expand, right? So he's not really advocating for an expansion and keeping slavery. His hope is it eventually dies off. Radical abolitionists, what did they advocate?
Well, just, complete, like, everyone.
Yeah, just get rid of slavery. Yeah, exactly.
Complete.
And Sullivan saying anything in here about, hey, we just need to get rid of slavery no matter what right now?
No.
No.
He's talking about having slave states.
Yeah, he's talking about having slave states, and he's talking about it's going to be a natural process. And sorry, guys, they're going to be slaves for 2 or 3 more generations, but be happy your grandchildren will be free through a natural process. One person said Southern landowners who did not own slaves. There is a certain logic to that. Most people did not own slaves. We do know that it was kind of an economic goal for most families in the South. you know, to get a slave eventually. That's how you climb the socioeconomic ladder. If this one was on the final, I might actually would have gone back and thought about it, given credit for it if I, you know, talked to the person and asked what their rationale was for picking that. They got the rationale right. But most people got the most correct answer. Abolitionists in the various colonization societies. What were the colonization societies advocating? It's kind of in the name of it too, if you forget, by the way. Did they want to keep slaves around? Yeah. Yeah, that's where we got those movements. You know, Liberia, the whole country of Liberia is formed because of this movement. Get the slaves freed and get them away from us, move them somewhere else. What's he saying about, you know, slaves are going to be freed eventually, and what is he going to hope happens to them? They all move to Mexico. So it is most similar in that, at least in the concept, and not the specific locations. It's not saying send them back to Africa, send them to Haiti. He's saying, but he is agreeing with them. We don't want them in the country, basically. So, not exactly a progressive-minded individual, even if you say he does oppose slavery. All right, regarding Mexico, the acquisition of Texas, in Sullivan's view, most people got will benefit Mexico in the long run. Why did he say it would benefit Mexico in the long run? Anyone remember?
That was one I initially got wrong.
One you initially got wrong? Okay. Did he view this, three people picked this one, was justifiable act that violated international law. Did he view it as a justifiable act?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Did he view it, but he didn't think it violated international law. Right. Was morally wrong and Mexico should be compensated, or we should keep Texas anyway? He didn't think it was morally wrong, basically, right? Was justifiable due to the Mexican government's poor treatment of their Native Americans. See that look on your face. That's the one you picked?
That's as close as I could infer.
Yeah. The key on that one was the group that was included on there. Native Americans, he doesn't really care about them whatsoever, does he? He was worried about how the people in Texas, the Americans who moved down there, were treated. Again, basically mirroring what the Texas Declaration of Independence said as far as what made their independence from Mexico just. Why did it benefit Mexico in the long run? Basically, he argued that we want this land, we're going to take it, you know, we're going to take the parts we want, so we may as well take the parts we want now instead of us bickering over it for decades. And then we don't, in his view, he said we didn't want the rest of it because it's populated with people who are mixed, you know, African, Asian, not Asian, Native American, and with some European in there. We didn't want the population added to ours. So he said, we take this part, then you get to be left in peace after that.
Yeah, he talked about them being, they have the common levels next to common.
It's kind of a scary argument to think of. That's basically what Hitler said when he took over like Czechoslovakia and all that. We're just going to take this part the Germans live in, and then we'll be happy and maintain peace. Then we're going to take over the rest of it anyway. All right. Based on this document, it is reasonable to assume that a common danger of traveling to the West at this time was, we went to the other document, didn't we? Sorry. This one, William Swain letter written on the trail to California. Right when he's writing it, he's saying they're basically having a party. Anyone remember what the big killer was on the route to California?
Disease.
It was disease, yeah. We know that as a fact, so if you knew the outside knowledge and applied that, this is one of those cases you probably get the correct response anyway. He has a little discussion here about people dying from disease, and apparently it's a very common thing, so it's a little bit of an inference here. What else do people pick? Hostilities with the Native Americans, and forest fires. Big forest fires. Did they mention forest fires at all? No. Okay, hostilities from the Native. Nobody wants to admit to that one now. That's okay. Hostilities with Native Americans, we know was something that a lot of people were scared about, but was it something that was as frequently happening? So, we know it was not the most common cause of death, and again, outside knowledge could help and get you to the correct answer on this one. Just based on how he describes the prevalence of disease up to that point in the trip, compared to relations with Native Americans, which one seems like it's the biggest killer? Definitely the disease. Any of you older people ever play like that old computer game, the Oregon Trail? You remember that? What was the most common thing you got in there? Sorry, you have died from dysentery or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
My wagon always turned over.
Oh, okay. I never actually played it, but.
Blanket almost turned
Yeah,
Oh.
I always went too fast.
Nobody picked passes through Mormon territory, which was good. Although there were quite a few incidents with Mormons later on. California Trail didn't go through their territory at this junction. So, kind of a moot point. Apparently people who immigrate westward very rarely survive the journey. So that was the second most common response. Okay. The correct response was, of course, the one most likely, or most people would want to turn home. What were most people going to California for? Gold. What did they want to do with it? They want to make money, and then what did they do? Go back home, yeah. Why do you want to stay out in the middle of where there's nothing but woods if you got $1 million, right? If you got $1 million, where do you want to go?
Anywhere you want.
Anywhere you want, but most people are going to go where there's
Back home.
the city, stuff to buy, yeah. Does mention some stuff here. Notice the postage there, 25 cents. That was pretty extravagant at the time, by the way. It was, that's what it cost when I was a kid to send a letter. Well, actually, the earliest I can remember, it actually cost like a nickel.
I remember it then.
Yeah, it went up to a dime when I was a kid. So, yeah, it went from that to a dime. I think the next was like 15 cents and then 19 cents. What is it now? 49 cents? Okay. I haven't used it stamp in a long time.
Email.
Yep.
So much faster.
Online bill pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's faster.
The times I have mailed stuff, it's been packages, and it's cost obviously more than just 1 cent. So. Which goes to our next question. Sending mail from the Western territories, most people got expensive and unreliable. If you saw that quarter, we're thinking about it in today's terms, it's like, that was pretty cheap. But we got to remember this is the 1800s. And the tone, when she describes that, is she describing it like it's cheap or expensive? Yeah. One person picked unreliable, but relatively inexpensive. The unreliable part would be accurate. The expensive part would be the one that killed that. Mostly carried by the Pony Express. Any mention of the Pony Express in the document? We do know that it existed. Did most mail go by the Pony Express? Actually, no. It was very rare because that was like the FedEx of the day. You sent that when you had the extra money to splurge, and you absolutely positively had to get it there within a month. Otherwise, you went the slow, regular mail system, which was cheaper, only 25 cents. I think the rates in Pony Express were usually like in the dollars. Might have been as much as FedEx is now, actually, believe it or not. All right, when she sends that, you may or may not have received some of the many letters I've sent you, kind of lead you to the unreliable part. So again, it's kind of actually in there in front of you. You do have to process, make a little bit of deduction out of it. All right, based on the description of the terrain, this party is likely to be entering what? Are they entering the Great Plains? No, what's the key on that? She's at the very early part here. She's mentioned the fact that the next territory is very hilly. How many hills are in the Great Plains? Right. Nearing their final destination. Did we get that at all? Definitely sounds like she's still got a long way to go, right? The location here, they're passing Fort Laramie tomorrow. Anyone know where exactly they could be? What modern day state? Wyoming, yeah. How close to Wyoming is California?
That's one thing that keyed it for me.
Good, yeah.
I knew Fort Laramie was way out there, I mean, they were already over the pines.
Yeah, if you know some geography, it helps on this. You don't have to know that geography, but it will help. Just leaving the Mississippi River Valley, same thing. We know Fort Laramie's way up there if you know the geography. We also know, where do you usually leave from? Remember that? Where was the gateway to the west? Missouri, specifically St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis.
And they've traveled a long way from that, right? Well, where's the Mississippi? It's what it runs right through St. Louis, right? That's why St. Louis is there, because it's where the Missouri and the St. Louis meet up. So we eliminate that one. Entering the Rocky Mountains, we know the territory is starting to turn hilly, so we're getting off the Great Plains, going into the mountains. Right. This one's an inference or outside knowledge. Either one would get you to this. The object of the journey described in the letter is most likely what? Gold. Establishing a trade route, some people pick that, or a trade business. Obviously, some people went out there and did that, but most people going to California, and if it had been a person on the Oregon Trail, different answer, right? We didn't have too much gold yet in Oregon. Those people were going there to farm. All right, William Swain most likely plans to, one person establish a successful business in California. Again, this is one of those where you're kind of applying your logic and outside information. Set up a business, maybe he is, maybe he isn't, right? Entering into politics, no one picked that, good, not even in the discussion. Establishing permanent residence. Acquire money and return home, the best thing, because that also encompasses this, doesn't it? You might be going out there to mine, you might be figuring to set up a business and gouge the miners. You might be saying, go out there, we're going to build a farm and jack up the prices on the food we sell to farmers. We don't have any evidence of what specific interest, but we do know he basically wants to get money and go back, right? That's in the document.
The very last line talks about him when he comes home, when I get home.
That's right. There's some other stuff. The object of the journey is all he mentions, right? You don't get an idea of the specific industry. So you're probably going to want to stay away from those, unless it could be the best choice if it has establish a store, build a farm, and mine gold. Which one at this point in time is most likely? Probably mine gold. But since it just says, wherever that phrase was, object of the journey, he's not specific. Okay, last one. The improvements in the health of William Swain that he describes are most likely attributable to, and this is one you have to have some outside knowledge from the period. 2 people picked improved diet. Is the diet likely better than it was back east?
No.
Yeah. If you're on the journey, what kind of foods are you mostly eating?
Salted food,
Yeah, stuff that's
just bit and
Yeah.
flour and.
preserved stuff, yeah.
Preserved stuff.
And everything then is preserved by salting it, pickling it, or it's in a dry form. So you probably got wheat or corn flour, meal, something like that. Jerky. And yeah, maybe a jar of pickles back there somewhere. That's about it. Could hunt on the way. And you see that in all the movies. Did a lot of these people hunt?
Yeah, they did.
They did, yeah. So probably some fresh meat in there. No vegetables though. Or fruit. This was a interesting one. Someone picked this. The improvements in health were likely to become from the alcohol consumed at the celebration. Usually that doesn't help your conditions much. Might make you feel better, I guess. Okay. Why was the drier climate in the West a good response? What was one of the things they sent people out there for? Tuberculosis. The drier climate apparently helped in that. So that would be your best choice. We don't know what actually afflicted this guy, right? So we couldn't see whether he had tuberculosis, pneumonia, or what. But we do know that's what people were sent out for. Okay. Any questions on these? Is it pretty clear? Again, I guess it's up to each individual as to why you're missing certain ones, but I get the feeling that a lot of these, just reading a little closer, making sure you understand their vocabulary, and they're writing this, will help a lot. So again, as we go into the actual documents again, one more time. A key here is, since you have the documents, there's some things you might ask on the exam, like what does this word mean in the document? Right. What's my likely answer going to be? Not even going to be look it up. It's like, hell, you had 3 weeks to look at these documents and look it up. Why are you bothering me with this now? Should have already done that. So, dictionary is not on the list of approved things, so you should go through here and look things up that you don't know now. Making sure that you understand what they mean, and sometimes in the dictionary you might have to go down to the 3rd or 4th definition that's listed in there, because it might be an older usage of the word than what we use it for now. All right, once again, the way to help study for this: one, you have the document, so limit what you study to what's going to be logically related to the document. This, come from Columbus, right out of the first chapter, right? You got to look at Columbus's expedition, obviously. You also want to see what's going on, why he's going in 1492 and not 1485. What forces are going on in Europe that are spurring exploration, what the final goal is, all that stuff. What he did a little later in his career. Basically, you want to know Columbus, and you want to know, in this case, Europe around there. Now, you also do want to know some things logically. When he gets to the Caribbean, he's claiming his territory. Who's already there? Native Americans. How do you justify saying, here, Columbus, everything you find, you're going to get to keep? Basically, giving him dominion over whoever's already there, presumably their own governments forever, going back to antiquity. Right. Where was he expecting to end up?
Continent of North America.
Well, where was he expecting to end up?
Oh, India.
Yeah, India. Yeah. And why was he going there? What motivates people? What's always the best response when you ask, why was someone doing something?
Monetary.
Money, yeah. We get rich trading in spices and stuff. Okay. Mayflower Compact, of course, this relates back to Pilgrims. All right, so obviously you want to read about the Mayflower Compact itself, because the book does discuss that. Right. You also want to know some other things, like if this is an arrangement to set up a government, what things impact how a government is set up when people do that? Would we over here, if we were like starting over from scratch, say, yeah, I think we're going to have, how about having like an all-powerful king? You know, make all the decisions and we don't, would we go for that?
It works so well over there.
Yeah, it did work so well, right? That's, you know.
So basically that relates to the structure of their society?
Yes, it relates to the structure of their society. So when you examine the government, it's not in a vacuum. What were the social forces within their movement that would lead them to craft something like this? And we know some things, for example, like the Puritans. What was their view on the absolute authority of the king?
Well, they believed that God was the absolute authority.
Yeah, God is the absolute authority. So were they disloyal subjects?
Yes.
Well,
Not disloyal, but they weren't disloyal in that fact, but they were here because they wanted to get away from it.
exactly. Yeah, they wanted to reshape the church, not the government per se. They actually mentioned some stuff in here. I think one of the questions asked you what they consider themselves, and you don't want to think that they're viewing themselves as independent. They're still loyal to the king. They're even like invoking his name in their compact, right? But if you understand their religion, you know that they don't think the king's absolute, because they think if there's a conflict between a law the king proposes and something in the Bible that's God's law, which one do they follow? God's law, regardless of what they think is the king's power.
They're smart that follow the king, otherwise they're going to get beheaded.
Yeah, you get beheaded. Like, to them, they would say it's better to be beheaded than to spend, eternity in hell. But does that have some ramifications for us later on in the revolution? Yeah, what do we think of the king's authority? Not absolute, right? Where do we get that idea from? Some of these people. Notice King James was over there in England at the time. Who published the Bible that these guys were reading?
James.
That's what our tendency to think now is. If you go to like one of the fundamental Baptist churches, they'll tell you the King James Bible is the absolute, perfect translation of the Bible, most perfect translation of the Bible, best one we've ever had. These guys didn't use that Bible. They used something called the Geneva Bible. And anyone know why they came up with the King James Bible?
Yeah, he wanted to establish that religion first off, change the religion of the country.
Yeah.
And so he did it, he felt as the king that would be absolute.
Yeah, they used a version called the Geneva Bible, because they had to sneak out and publish it in Geneva, Switzerland, and send it back to England because it was kind of illegal. The language is virtually the same in the King James and that Geneva Bible. It's like 95% exactly alike. The big difference was in those footnotes that you see, because a lot of the footnotes in the Geneva they contain stuff like, well, when the king does this, or this is an example of the king that was unjust and the people should have disobeyed their king and followed God's law. A lot of that stuff gets taken out. The King James Bible was made to get all that stuff that would lead people to rebel against his authority out of there. So that's something in our revolution that's often overlooked. The impact of that religious belief, because these days we think of the religions as being conservative and kind of the opposite of progressive, especially politically. Back then, religion was leading them to be more willing to rebel and to question the government. All right, the Sedition Act, as we mentioned before, passed during John Adams' administration. Good part of the text. Discusses the Alien and Sedition Act. Also plays a big role in the election of 1800. So you want to, from the outside knowledge, you want to make sure that you brush up on Adams' administration as relates to this particular law. its impact in the election. And probably wouldn't hurt to go look at what Thomas Jefferson did with this law after he wins the election. Any questions that might draw something out that should be very basic information, like we go back to like when they drafted the Bill of Rights. Which principle in our Bill of Rights would that violate?
With the first one?
Yeah, it's, well, the First Amendment, yeah, which particular clause or
Was that the right?
Constitutional right.
For, lawful assembly or something?
not precisely. What, do you remember what sedition was?
Well, sedition is like when you speak publicly against the current government.
Yeah.
Something of that nature.
Yes, yes, it could violate the freedom of assembly in that sense, you're right. Yeah, I mean, basically you get punished for speaking or printing stuff, so freedom of the press, freedom of speech. You don't really have to go back and read about how we constructed the Bill of Rights and all that debate to get something like that. That should be basic knowledge, I would hope. I guess I might be wrong, but. All right, Declaration of the People of Texas, we looked at the practice manifest destiny document and a lot of parallels in there. Obviously, you want to read about the revolution in Texas. Again, you might see a comparison to the Declaration of Independence, so you might want to at least familiarize yourself a little bit with that. I would not go through and read in depth about how we, decided to declare independence, the whole political process and all that stuff. Just more or less a general idea of what this is, what the Declaration of Independence is, how they're similar documents. Not necessarily any in-depth, philosophical discussion in there. Some other things related to that also are U.S. foreign policy. Remember, Texas Independent Republic, we did not annex it in 1835, 36 when this was going on. It took almost a decade before we did that. Why did we hold off? There were diplomatic reasons, and those may be relevant. So the U.S. policy essentially towards Texas, what was that? That's something you want to know for that document also. Last one, the Crittenden Compromise. This would actually be right after Lincoln's election. Obviously, you want to look at the chapter on the period leading up to the Civil War. Anything in this that would lead you to say, I need to go study like all the battles in the Civil War? No. Look at the causes and effect, the compromises, how people were, advocating for secession, and what their issues were, why the South felt they had complaints, why the North, disregarded those complaints. Well, I want to go back a little bit. I would study all the major compromises. Compromise of 1850, go back to all the way back to 1821 with the Missouri Compromise. Don't have to just go through the whole history there. Some of it you're going to be going through anyway with like Texas and stuff like that, so you should have some of the outside information from that. But look particularly at this period in the 50s, right before the Civil War. This can be complex, so make sure you understand the Southern rationale for secession thoroughly. There would likely be some questions on this compromise, like such and such, provision in this compromise. Would it or would it not have actually solved the South's issue? Was this something the South would likely have picked up on, and if it could have gotten this passed, would have said that's acceptable to us, we're coming back in the Union. Right? So that means you got to know those issues and be precise on them. And that means all this stuff about obviously slavery, but also the tariff, general concept of states' rights, differentiating between the existence of slavery and the expansion of slavery. All of this can be very precise, so you want to study that pretty much in depth. But that's probably a lot better for you. You get to reduce a whole lot because you know there's a lot of stuff you get to exclude and not study. So what you're studying less, but you want to know it more thoroughly, essentially. Again, some general advice on this. You got the documents, so go through, break them down. You can highlight and pick out things that you think are particularly relevant. Using those sheets that are in your reference files for breaking down the documents can be useful. It depends on you and how thorough you are in your analysis as to how useful they are to you. If you do a basic analysis, probably not going to help much. If you do a thorough analysis in those sheets, likely will help you more. Vocabulary, if you have a question in front of you, I think probably the worst thing to do would be to just get it wrong just because you don't know the definition of a word in the document. All right, that would stop. So go through if there's anything you don't understand in there, any definitions. Make sure you look them up, put them into context, try to figure out what the point was the guy's trying to say. There were a few on the practice where we looked at it and said that might have been the reason. And look at the language, it might be confusing if you don't know the specifics of the definitions of the words. Right? And you got plenty of time to still do that. Now, you mentioned you had to read the document through about 3-4 times.
No,
All there?
towards the end,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Just to clearly see what his wording
Yeah.
was.
it's better to read through it 3-4 times now, go into the exam and be prepared than it is to just come in an exam and have to read it 3-4 times once you're in the exam. For one reason, just time. You can get done with it quicker. Doesn't necessarily mean you do better, I suppose. But I prefer to do the exam as quickly as possible rather than dragging it out. The longer you drag it out, what's more likely to happen? Get fatigue, get mental fatigue, get possibly to the point where you're just like, oh, heck, but I'm just going to put in answers. Yeah. So the more prepared you are, the less you have to do in the exam, the quicker you go. Generally, the more efficient you are, and generally the better you do. It doesn't always have to work out that way, but keep in mind, and they're saying now, the average attention span of a person, the most you can focus on a given topic is about how long it is?
Yeah, 45 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. 45 minutes, that's why our, if we had classes 3 days a week, it'd be like 50 minutes long. I would just keep that hands like that because that's no longer make people focus on stuff. The less time you spend on it, the more you're able to function, basically.
It's the language, because it's just not how we speak or write today.
It definitely isn't. They had different grammatical structures, and they had different definitions for some of the words we use. And they obviously had more extensive vocabularies than we do. So that's why I say it's key now. You know, look up those words you don't know. Prepare yourself as much as possible, essentially. Again, the key to this, and where most people have struggled, is with the lack of preparation. A lot of people think, oh, hey, we're going to have the documents in front of us. We can come in, and I'll just go through the documents and be able to answer all the questions. It doesn't work that way. Obviously, since some of the questions require you to know something outside of this, you're going to miss those. If you say, I'm just going to read the documents when I get in here. So don't do that. Make sure you actually study. The second thing is don't rush through them. Take your time, break them down now. Understand them as thoroughly as possible. You're going to have to apply logic on some of these and You're gonna know that you're gonna have to come up with stuff that's not in the document, and maybe is not an actual fact that you know. You're gonna have to make a logical, reasoned deduction. So, be prepared for that. The more you know about the document, the easier it is to draw logical conclusions. If your presumption as to what the document says is incorrect, what's going to happen to your logical deduction based on what you've read in that document? It's also going to be incorrect. Okay? So that thorough understanding of the document's critical. Your knowledge of the outside material, critical. Just because you have the documents and it's a document-based test does not mean you should just come in here and expect to break open the documents and pass. Y'all did pretty well on the practice assessments actually, but you've probably seen that you're going to have to know some stuff, right? I do get quite a few people, or have gotten quite a few people in past semesters who come in and they'll get a 30-something or 40-something on their final exam. And usually the reason why is that when I go through there and I look, they get a lot of the questions that are straight out of the document correct, and guess which ones they missed? The ones you actually had to study for. What does that tell me? They didn't study. Right? Also, a lot of people miss stuff that is right there in the document. And why do they do that? Or what can help to prevent that? Read the document and understand it before you come in. So essentially, it's just like any other exam. The more you prepare, the better you're going to do. So especially, again, for the online people, it's a very common thing for the online classes. They struggle with these even more than the face-to-face do. And that's one thing I see more frequently there is they come in unprepared. It also goes back to a lot of other stuff. Like, if you did the assessments, and you're just like, okay, first time I got a 25, I'm just going to redo it. Just to make sure I get like an 80 so it goes in the grade book like that, and you don't try to actually learn the stuff, you basically screwed yourself over for this the whole time you've been here. So make sure your focus is on learning the material, not just getting a decent grade. Because if you focus on getting a grade, you just go through the assessments and you don't retain anything, it hurts you now. Guess what? If you actually learn the material, guess what though? You got to get the grade anyway, right? So learn the material, the grades will come. Focus on the grades. You might not get either the knowledge or the grades. So main thing is just take it seriously. Just because it's a document-based exam, don't assume it's a breeze. In fact, most people I've had who've taken these said it's the hardest exams that they've had. And it's usually because they don't bother to prepare. All right, any questions about the documents, the exam, any of that stuff?
Any questions on
Good question. I'll send you an answer to that. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like between 30 and 40. It's not a lot of questions for the time you got. That's because I expect you're going to have to take some time from each one.
Do we have class on Monday?
Technically, we do have class on Monday, so is there anyone who wants to have class on Monday? Is that a rhetorical question? Get up early. Okay. Here's what we do. I don't actually ever cancel class, but